Hello everyone, welcome to my latest video. In this particular video, I'm going to demonstrate how I configure a dual boot system with Windows 10 and Linux Mint 20.1. I will be doing two methods. The first method will be a single drive in the system. In this case, it'll be a 500 gigabyte NVMe drive. A 500 gig is pretty much what I would consider to be a minimum to do a dual boot system, just so you have enough room, not necessarily for the Linux system, believe it or not, but to make sure you have enough room for Windows and a few odds and ends. The second instance will be a two-drive system, which will consist of a 256 gigabyte SATA 3 solid-state drive and a much larger 1 terabyte SATA 3 hard disk drive. So it'll be a mechanical drive, which means that the second install will be a little bit slower. Um, this would apply also if you happen to have a 256 solid state drive as a boot drive and a 1 terabyte solid state drive for your games and so forth and so on. So either way, these methods will work. There should not be any problems. As you're about to see, the first method is very simple, very straightforward. The second one is a little bit more involved, but not overwhelming, and certainly shouldn't be that hard to manage. Anyway, here we go, and let's see what we get, okay? Okay, here's what we got. We got our standard Windows desktop here, Windows 10. And what we're going to do now is, and I will stress this again, that you're going to want to make sure that you install Windows first in either of the two instances I'm going to show you on how to install the system. What you basically have to do is we're going to reboot to a USB flash drive. So in this particular case, we're going to do the restart. And when the system reboots, in this case, since it's an ASRock board, we will hit F11 while we wait for the thing to come up, and it will present us with screen. There we go. And we're going to pick the SanDisk here, which has our Linux Mint 20 on it. We're going to boot from that. We're going to do default, start 20.1. And this will take a moment or two at least to come up. It detected one of the printers on the network. That's good. All right, so we're going to basically this is very simple. This is very straightforward. Once you see how easy that the first method is to do this, you'll be surprised. All right, so basically we're going to do the install routine here. Obviously English. Obviously US English keyboard because I'm in the United States. You're going to want to install the multimedia codec, so just check the box. And it will do some thinking. And at some point here, there we go. And you're going to choose the first action. You're going to install Linux alongside Windows Boot Manager. Okay, so this is going to be really straightforward. I will remind you again, you should always do backups before you do anything to your system, just in case something goes wrong. But this should work without any problem. We're going to hit continue. And it's going to present us with what it wants to do to the boot drive, to the main drive. It wants to just about split it in half. Now, you don't have to do that if you don't want to, and you may not have enough room. I tend to use this and move this down to, let's see if I can get this to cooperate here. This mouse pointer is not very good. I basically give the Linux partition somewhere around 120 gigabytes. You can do more, you can do less, but I think 120 is enough. If you feel like you want to play with it a little bit more, install more software in it, then I would suggest maybe 150-ish. So let's see how close I can come to 150. Come on, little mousey. There we go. So that's what we're going to do. Now, it's going to take care of reallocating or shrinking the original partition for the Windows system, make enough room for the Linux system, and then install. So basically all we do is we hit install now. And it's telling you that, before you do anything, previous changes have to be written. Make sure that you are absolutely sure that you've got yourself settled, and continue. Now it will shrink the Windows partition, and it warns you that it's going to write everything. Hit continue. In this case, yes, I'm in the New York time zone. It will ask for a username of some sort. Let's just put in generic user. And you'll want a password. Doesn't really matter. You can make it up whatever you want it to be. I'll put in this password, which is fairly simple. You can have it log you in automatically if you want to. Just it'll go right to the desktop when you get into Windows, or require the password. I tend to put require password. That's just me. You're welcome to do whatever you want to do. Okay, at this point, it's pretty much just let it rip. And it will copy all the files it needs. It will install all kinds of software on the system. And you pretty much just have to sit back and watch. This install is being done on a Ryzen 3 system with a 500 gig NVMe drive. So this should go fairly quickly. I don't anticipate it taking a whole lot of time. As you can see, it installs Firefox. You can do Netflix, YouTube, obviously, without any problem. And there it goes. Now, I've got this hooked up to the network, so it may also be pulling down some additional files. Whether you have the network plugged in or not, it's entirely up to you. It will get what it needs. If it doesn't find something that's not critical, or something that, if it doesn't see the network, it just won't install any updates right away. And LibreOffice is basically a Microsoft Office clone. It's free. It handles pretty much all the Microsoft formats. It includes the entire suite. There's a equivalent of Word. There's an equivalent of Excel. I think there might even be an equivalent of PowerPoint in there. I don't remember off the top of my head. But there's a lot of good stuff, at least in Linux Mint, which is what we're dealing with here. I like this particular distribution over a few of the other distributions. It is Ubuntu based, but I think it looks a lot nicer and behaves a lot nicer than Ubuntu itself. So this is just the particular flavor of Linux that I like. Obviously, there's so many out there to choose from. You have something else you might be interested in, then your installation should be very similar to this. There shouldn't be a whole lot different here. And as you can see from the panels that are going by, these are some of the software that it will install by default. There's a lot in the system. I don't play with Linux that much, but okay, here we go. Installing this would be the Brub 2. That's the bootloader. Brub is the bootloader for this. Okay, so there we go. It's already finished. I don't know that that took even 5 minutes to do. So what we're going to do now is we're going to restart now. It's going to ask us to remove, remove the thing. So we're going to remove the thumb drive. Press enter. Now when it reboots, it's going to present us with this here. It defaults to Linux Mint by itself. You can just let it sit there. It will eventually go into it itself. And there we go. Put in the password. Oops. There we go. Helps if I put the right password in. Okay, there you go. Has a welcome screen here where you can, there's all kinds of documentation. There's first step stuff here. I mean, we can go through this, but I'm really not going to. There's all kinds of things that you can do. Snapshot is essentially system backups. There are driver manager, update manager. There's all kinds of stuff in here that, and I'm going to put this off of here for right now. Okay, so we've got the system installed. And if we take a real quick look around, these are all the things that are around here. You can obviously look through all here. You've got your driver manager. You've got your, let's see, there's your office stuff. LibreOffice. Again, that's your, it sounds like kind of like your Microsoft Office equivalent. Now, if you're looking for a particular piece of software to install, like for example, there is a utility here where you can see all the partitions on your drive, but it doesn't install by default because it is a little bit dangerous to deal with. So if you come down to where it says Software Manager, here's all kinds of, just you give it a category of what software you might be looking for. If you have a particular name of a particular software that you know that Linux has, but it's not installed by default, you can type that in. Now, for example, I'm going to type in gpart, which will give me, this is the partition editor. Now, again, this is dangerous software if you don't know what you're doing. You want to make sure that if you're going to install this, you are very familiar with how to partition or move partitions and so forth and so on. Otherwise, you could really screw something up. I'm going to install it just because I want you to see, and yes, it will ask for a password. This is like the UAC on Windows 10 and Windows Vista, which was really obnoxious. And we're just going to launch it. And yes, again, it's going to ask, it asks you to make sure that you're, not doing something stupid. So there you go. There's the Windows partition here. There's the Linux partition. Now, it took a little bit more extra space to, I think, put a, no, it didn't. It didn't put a swap file in. There's 16 gigabytes of memory in this system, so you shouldn't really need a swap file, but there it is. It repartitioned the drive all by itself without doing anything weird. So that's the thing that we've got. Now, there is one other thing that I'm going to show you that, here we go. When you restart the system, it is going to, again, anytime you restart the system, it's going to want to default to Linux. What you have to do is before the timer, you're going to come down here, you're going to select the Windows Boot Manager. And here we are. Everything's perfectly fine, just as we left it. We're good. We're gold. Now, The one other thing that I will um, tell you about now, the fact that it defaults to Linux when the machine restarts for any reason whatsoever could possibly be a problem if you're doing Windows updates. Because if you're going to do Windows updates and you're going to leave the machine alone, when it goes to restart by itself, if it does decide to restart by itself, um, it's going to boot to Linux instead. So you'll be come back an hour later and the updates haven't actually finished because the system didn't restart. I'm going to show you how to very simply change the default on the boot screen so that it will default to Windows. Now, in order to do that, we have to go back into the Linux system. So we're going to just go ahead and hit the default, which is fine. It'll start up. Okay, we're going to put, again, obviously our password back in. Okay, we're going to go back into this menu here. We're going to go back to Software Manager, which I could just type into here what I was looking for, and it'll come up. Now we're going to go back down to Software Manager, and we're going to search, and we're going to search for the word grub. And it's the third item right here, Grub Customizer. This is a way you, without having to edit any configuration files, and if you're very, very new to Linux, probably shouldn't do that anyway. But we're going to install this piece of software. Obviously, we have to give it permission. Okay, we're going to launch this. Again, it'll ask to make sure that we want to do this because this is changing things in the system and you can screw it up. Okay, so here we are. Now, all we're going to do is we're going to hit the General Settings tab and Default Entry. And it defaults to the first entry in the list. All we're going to do is we're going to do drop down and we're going to do this. That's the only change we're going to make. After that change, you hit save, and it's done. Now, we're going to close this. We're going to go back here. We're going to restart. Now, you will notice when the boot menu comes up this time that the default highlight is our Windows system. So then we can just hit enter. Now, again, the reason you might want to do this is because if you have a tendency to let Windows do updates and restart itself while you're away, it only goes about halfway through the process instead of going completely through the update process. So that's what we got. And if I can really quickly go into here. Let's see if there's any update that needs to be done. Now, there are actually no updates because I just recently did the most recent update earlier today. So that's it. That's what we got. It's pretty simple. I think it's pretty straightforward. But, you know, I don't know that you'll run into a problem. If you're working on a single drive system, this is probably the way you want to do it. Now, there's another method we can do. For example, we'll do a 2-drive system. And what that will be is you may have a gaming computer that has a smaller boot drive. Let's say, for example, it has a 256 gigabyte boot drive. And you really don't want to take up any room on the boot drive. Well, you can install Linux to the secondary drive, which in a lot of instances is either a 1 terabyte mechanical drive or a 1 terabyte solid state drive. But we can approach that here in just a little bit. But this first way of doing a Linux install and creating a dual boot system, again, very straightforward, very simple. So with that, we'll conclude this part of it. And in the next part, I will show you what happens when you do it with a 2-drive system. I'll be back. Okay, here we go. This method number two drive system. Now, this particular system I've reconfigured so that we have what you might see in a typical gaming machine that's available, which is a boot drive, which is solid state, and a storage drive for games and so forth, which is typically a mechanical drive, but not always. So in this case here, this 256 here, this is a little bit too small to effectively run Windows 10 and Linux Mint off the same drive. Got a little bit of storage constraint here. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to install Linux Mint onto the mechanical drive, which has plenty of free space here. It's a 1 terabyte drive. Well, we've got plenty of free space. So that's where we're going to stick everything. So it'll be the same method as before. Same type of deal. Just going to restart the machine with the USB thumb drive already in. And we're going to bring up the boot menu from the BIOS, which again, on an ASRock board is F11. Your board may be different. Your system may be different. But in any case, we're going to do the same thing as before. F11. There we go. Again, we're going to do the SanDisk. Do the default there. Okay, there we go. And again, this is all going to be the same type of deal. I'm going to go through all the steps again, just as we did in the previous setup. All that's going to be the same. Install the multimedia codecs. Now, what's going to be different when we get to that particular screen is a couple of different things. I'm going to show you two ways that you can do the two drive install. One way is to let the installation routine itself decide. So if I, again, take the default and I hit continue, it already is looking for a drive that has more than adequate space. So it automatically selected the terabyte drive. I could just as easily force it, maybe, no, maybe not. Okay, it won't let me force it, but that's fine. That's good. But again, same thing. You can tell it, okay, yeah, let it have all that room, or you can tell it to shrink it down, and that's fine. And you can do the install now. The only problem is if you do this, there's a very good chance that it will try to load the Grub bootloader into the second drive, which honestly, we don't really want to do that. And the reason that we don't want to do that is because if for some reason that mechanical drive fails, and it will fail, and the bootloader is actually on that mechanical drive, if the bootloader is gone, you'd have a non-bootable system. So we're going to go and do something else. And here we have our drives. We scroll down, there's the terabyte drive right here. And I'm going to do a change. And basically what I'm going to do is I'm just going to tell it, okay, I want this partition from 1 terabyte. I want to shrink it down to, oh, let's say 280. Okay. So we hit OK. It tells us, you make sure that you want to do this because you can't undo it. We're going to hit continue. Now it will readjust that partition. There we go. Scroll down, you'll find, okay, it's readjusted the partition. We now have a free space. Now the free space is where we're going to install the Linux Mint system. So what we're going to have to do at this point then is we have to do an add. And it already selects the default size. There's the Linux file system ext4. We want to do the mount point as root, and that's what that means. That's root right there. So we don't have to do anything else other than that. Hit OK. Now, again, notice that it says device for the bootloader installation. It's selected the 1 terabyte drive. We don't want to do that. What we want to do is we want to make sure that it's on this drive, which is the boot drive, the 256. Once that's there, that's all set up. Notice that our partition table now says there's where it's going to install the Linux file system. We're good. Everything's good there. Now we hit install now. It just, again, says, you sure you want to do this? That's fine. Hit continue. Again, all these are default things. Again, we're going to put in default name. We'll put in a password. Okay. And hit continue. And this is, again, no different than what we did previously. All this stuff is going to be exactly the same as the previous installation scenario, just that it's going to be done on a mechanical drive, so it'll be a little bit slower. Now, if you happen to have a 1 terabyte solid state drive instead of a mechanical drive, then this will go, again, pretty fast. But since we're dealing with a mechanical drive, this will take a bit more time to do the install. So we're all set to go. We're just going to let it do its thing. I will probably edit to the end, or at least speed up this particular portion of the video, just so that I can condense the time a little bit, because it will take a bit longer. Okay, there we go. We are finished. So now we're just going to, again, restart now. Okay, remove thumb drive, enter. System will reboot. And again, as in the previous, we have the default, which is Linux Mint. We're just going to go ahead and do that, because we're going to go back in again and do the same deal as before. We're going to install Grub Customizer, and we're going to set the default to Windows 10. Again, the reason we do that is because if you're doing updates in Windows and the machine reboots itself, if it's set to Linux Mint by default, you get the first stage of the update is done, but you could come back to the machine an hour later and it's sitting there in Linux Mint and the other part hasn't finished. So, so that's, you want to make sure that it defaults to that, just for the sake of argument. And of course, since this is running off of a mechanical hard drive, it will be slower. There's really no way around that. It will be slower. Again, if your terabyte drive is a SATA 3 drive or another NVMe drive, then obviously it'll be a lot faster than this. But okay, let's close that. And again, we're going to go through the same deal before. We're going to come up here, and I'm going to actually type in Software Manager. There we go. It's the first item. Hit that guy right there. Okay, again, we're going to search for the word grub. I type it right. Okay, again, customizer, install, permission to actually install the software itself. We'll launch it. Again, needs permission because it is an administrator type deal. Again, general tab. Again, all we're going to do is change this to that. Hit save. Okay, we're done there. We're done here. And we're going to just verify again that it's going to do the correct thing. Restart. As you can see, our highlighted entry is the Windows Boot Manager. We hit enter. And we are back in our Windows 10 system. That's all there is to it. So there you go, two methods. Like I said, the second method, you got a 2-drive system. You want to make sure that Grub installs the bootloader to the actual boot drive. If you haven't loaded onto the second drive, like in this case, it wanted to install it to the 1 TB drive by default. If something happens to that drive, you won't even get the Grub boot menu when you restart the machine. You will get basically a blank screen with a Grub prompt, and you have no real way of booting the system. So you need to be careful about that one step. That on 2-drive system, you want to make sure that you probably want to go into the custom. You can do the resizing of the partition, and you can go from there. Anyway, I will have some thoughts and ramblings here shortly. So I'll be back momentarily. Okay, so there you have it. We got two methods to make a dual boot system with Windows 10 and Linux Mint 20.1. Now, as you saw, the first one was pretty straightforward. Single drive system. All you got to do is just reallocate a little space for it, and the installer will take care of everything. It'll place the bootloader onto the drive without any problem. You'll get the menu. As you saw, we went in later on and we changed what the default boot was, and the reason of that, of course, is the Windows Update situation that I mentioned. So that's pretty much straightforward. It's really simple, really easy. As long as you follow these steps, you shouldn't have any problem doing this. There should be no damage. Again, I will repeat this often. Be sure that you have a backup before you do anything, no matter which you decide to use. Now, on the second method, you notice that I did everything manually. And there's a reason why I did everything manually. If you go through the same default method that it wants to do, I mean, yes, it found the right drive and it wanted to allocate the right space, and that's all fine and good. But it will tend to try to install the bootloader on that second drive. Now, that's not necessarily a problem. However, if for some reason that drive dies or something happens to it, or you replace it with something else, you will lose the Grub loader. And then when that happens, the system refuses the boot. You're going to wind up with a screen that looks very similar to this. And that's not good. So that's part of the reason why I went in and I did the second method manually, because it allowed me the option to say, okay, no, I don't want the bootloader on the terabyte drive. I want it on the actual boot drive. So just be aware of that, and you shouldn't have any real trouble. Yeah, your boot drive could die, but if your boot drive dies, guess what? Linux and Windows are gone, or at least hosed. But at least you know that. You know that going in. So those are the methods. Hopefully this was educational for you. If you have any questions, obviously, again, leave them in the comments, and I'll be happy to answer whatever I can. I am in no means a Linux expert. There are many, many other people out there, especially on YouTube, who know more about Linux than I do. I'm doing this from a layman's perspective. Maybe not your average home user. I think I'm a little bit above that. But it's just I don't know everything. I'm sure that there will be plenty of comments that will be in there that will tell me, well, you should do this, or you should do that, or you didn't do this right, you didn't do that right. Hey, it's YouTube, it's the internet, everybody's got an opinion. Not everybody deserves to be heard, but it's okay. I'll live with it. What can I tell you? Anyway, hopefully, like I said, this was educational for you. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Give it a thumbs up if you want. Subscribe if you want. I don't put out a lot of content. I don't do it on a regular basis, and certainly not a weekly basis. I do have another video coming up that will be swapping out my video card. I was actually able to get a 30 series graphics card. I don't know how. I think it just the gods were smiling on me. I don't know. But the next video will be swapping a GTX 1650 Super out of my system and putting in the 3060. I'm going to run some very, very basic benchmarks before the swap and then after the swap to see how things are. But I think that video might actually be a little bit of fun. Haven't decided if I'm going to do it live yet or not. That is the only caveat. I don't know. Anyway, thanks for stopping by. Hopefully I'll see you again pretty soon. Till then, have fun.